doesn't feel like there's that quote unquote path of predictable progress that like maybe their parents had or their grandparents had. For Gen Z, you don't have that predictable return on a college education anymore because of things like AI, because of how expensive college has gotten. You don't necessarily have a path toward buying a house that feels even remotely approachable. And, if you think about retirement or just moving through a career path, that also feels really far away. And so I think that element of always being rejected from everything, or at least feeling like you're being rejected from everything, creates those elements of nihilism that show up in how Gen Zers might spend or save or invest.
If you've clicked on this video, you've already granted me some level of permission. In a content-saturated world, it's really easy to see that attention is some form of currency, right? But what was less clear to me is what came up in this very interesting, you should watch the whole thing, Ezra Klein, Kyla Scanlon interview for the New York Times around attention economics. And that is, now we've positioned attention to be the required precursor to any exchange of value. And I think importantly, fulfilling that initiation has its own set of values and rules, or lack thereof. I'm a grumpy young lady, and there's no more denying that attention is the bedrock of our economy. It's the baseline, it's the loss leader, it's what gets you in the door, sinking costs for farther game. It's the rotisserie chicken in the back of the Costco store for $5.99. It's MoviePass when they decided to let everyone go see movies for nothing, although that didn't exactly work out as planned. And it's what every company, every small business, every artist who wants to be fiscally competitive needs to do in today's day and age. As the CEO of Liquid Death often puts it, entertain or die. It's no longer the product or piece that sparks movement. It's you creating things that can spark that attention, that gives you the potential to create some sort of movement. And it may feel like a fairly small difference, but it has huge implications. One of the examples they talked about in this video is the hottest little startup right now called Cluely. If you don't know, Cluely is essentially an AI-based note-taker app, of which, there are hundreds of these sorts of tools on the market. But Cluely has raised $5.3 million in seed funding, which is thanks to one of its founders, Roy Lee, who was kicked out of Colombia for cheating with AI and engages in self-described Rizz marketing. In the launch video for this service, you can see Roy himself go on a fictionalized date with someone, only to secretly use Cluely's technology in order to give him an upper hand on this date. In another video, he parodies the film The Social Network, putting him in the role of Mark Zuckerberg himself, except he's drawing dicks on a whiteboard. And for the piece of resistance on Roy's magical, mystical lore, controversially appealing product, Cluely is stamped by the slogan, "Today it's cheating, tomorrow it's fair." I think this is the perfect example of the separation of the initial marketing to gather attention from the context of the product, right? Roy says himself in several interviews, the reason why this relatively unknown, fairly simple product has gone viral is in a marketplace like LinkedIn for a product that's marketed to people who characteristically are a bit more button up in the way that they express themselves. It stands out. A bit different, but this also made me think about the discourse around Sabrina Carpenter's upcoming album, Man's Best Friend. I think a lot of people were really outraged about this, and because of that, it's in the public narrative. We're talking about the release, and it feels obvious to me that this is deliberate, right? So many of these people are successful because they can skirt the line of what was currently deemed socially acceptable. I do wonder what it's going to be like in a decade when the race to the bottom is far gone. But regardless of how you feel about Sabrina Carpenter's album cover and her music and what she seems to stand for or not stand for as an artist, if we look at her career, there's no denying that her big debut, right, after several albums of not breaking into the mainstream, resulted out of a love triangle. In many such cases, we don't expect the people we love to intend to incite controversy in us, but maybe we should start to. And album sales are one thing, how we present our art and products, how we communicate on a smaller scale is one thing. But what I think is really dangerous is what they touched on later into the video, alluding to what happens when attention is weaponized into a more dangerous feedback loop, as we've seen with the proliferation of betting markets. Last year, during the entire election, there was this huge billboard in Times Square that I would pass all the time that would have a live predictive outcome of who is going to win based on the bets from this site called Kalshi. These betting companies often operate within a legal gray area. It's not uncommon to see them get banned and then become legal for a short period, and then that cycle continues. Another one of these big markets is called Poly Market, and some people might say, okay, whatever, we're betting on things we're talking about anyway. Why does it matter? I think it matters for two reasons. For one, if we just go to the Poly Market site today, on the same page where people are betting who will win Love Island Season 7, we are betting Trump and Epstein files, will they be released? With a live percentage point, right? It's kind of disgusting. It just, I mean, outside of it feeling wrong, just as we consume within our social feeds, it's almost as if these items have equal points of importance because they're given equal parts of our attention, at least in the way that they're represented. And the second big differentiator is that there is real money tied to this. And in that case, I think we're turning more and more important things into how the stock market works. And I don't think that's a good thing. If you talk to anyone who is a regular person in the United States right now, they would probably tell you that it feels tough. The job market is difficult and it feels like there's less money around. It's really hard to pay bills. There's so much uncertainty. And yet we don't see that reflection always in the stock market. The stock market isn't necessarily a measure of how we're doing. It's a measure of belief by a certain subset of people. When we're betting on things as consequential as an election, as consequential as a war, and there's financial incentive for us to hop on whatever the most popular bandwagon is at the time, we get some pretty dangerous feedback loops. The last thing I really want to talk about is how Kyla how Kyla touches on this concept of the end of predictability, which seems to plague Gen Z. I am Gen Z for the record. And I think it makes a lot of sense because if we're in a world where you need to capture attention as the baseline of producing, providing, and exchanging value, and the premise of capturing that attention is backed by algorithms that are owned by a small group of companies to which you have no control over, you very well might not make it. I think what it all comes back to, people who are sorely divided and constantly incentivized to be divided. We are farmed to be enraged. It's really hard to come together and demand the protections and rights that we deserve. I think in isolation, we are much more pillable, we are much more desperate. If the basis of algorithms are built on division, the more community is destroyed, the more they profit. I laugh also because I'm uncomfortable, by the way. I don't think this is funny. I just, I laugh so I don't cry. But yes, anyway, I would love your thoughts on context collapse and betting markets and attention, how you are trying to preserve your attention and where you put it, all that good stuff, because it's hard. It's really hard. These people figuring out how to optimize it are smart, and the technology is smart, and we should not delude ourselves into thinking that it's not hard. Thanks for watching. Bye.